So a lot of people, once they get out of their 20s into their 30s and 40s, they drink 3 or 4 beers and they wake up the next day and they're like, man, I didn't used to feel like this. Like I'm so hungover. This never would have happened to me in college. Like, have you found differences with different age groups? Like younger people tend to tolerate alcohol better than older people with relative to
We haven't looked at that. What's probably going on is also as you age, you probably don't drink as often. So just like with exercise, if you go do deadlifts every 2 weeks, you're going to be sore every 2 weeks, right? Mm-hmm. But if you deadlift, 3-4 times a week, maybe that's a little over the top, but you're not going to get a sore. So it's probably the same thing that because part of you adapt to drinking alcohol. Your liver adapts to drinking alcohol, increases alcohol dehydrogenase, etc.
So we got.
So it's probably a training effect. So you got to keep it going. Yeah,
keep our conditioning up.
Exactly.
Welcome to Barbell Shrugged. Mike Bledsoe here with Doug Larson and Andy Galpin. And we're actually here in Las Vegas, Nevada, having some drinks. You've never seen us have drinks on the show before.
It's Spice Friday.
Or unless you watch episode 1, don't go do that. And we got kicked out of the NSCA conference.
Again.
No. The expo hall shut down, so we had to vacate, run up here to the hotel room, have some beers, and we're here with Jakob Vingren, and we're going to talk about the effect of booze on training. It seems to be a big question. It's like, should I be drinking? Do you feel guilty when you drink? Jakob, should we feel guilty about drinking after we train? Or on the weekends? Should I get smashed?
Well, should we?
Well, maybe not get smashed, but I think the evidence shows that you can have some alcohol. It really comes down to when do you drink, how much do you drink, what do you drink, and sort of how do you drink relative to when your workout is, what's before, after, during. All those different things really matter and fit into what are the outcomes going to be. And they vary also depends on what type of exercise you're doing.
Yeah. And I want to just back up a second to explain to them who you are first and why you think you have the right to tell us whether or not we should drink or not.
I have a beer, so.
We actually just pulled a random guy from downstairs at the casino.
He wasn't wobbling too bad, so we thought, this guy must know.
He knows
how to
drink
do
a
this
lot.
right. Mm-hmm. So can you tell us a little bit about your background, what you do for a living, and how your lab works?
Yeah, so I'm an associate professor at University of North Texas in exercise physiology and biological sciences. And a large part of my research deals with alcohol and the effects of alcohol in all different contexts of exercise, including how does it affect muscle, how does it affect hormones, performance, and so forth. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, so your basically job is to study whether or not alcohol makes a damn bit of difference.
Yeah, we do quite a few studies on alcohol as one of our sort of primary foci. And we're one of the few people in the world or places in the world that does that.
Do you get college students, you just get them fucked up and then have them work out and stuff like that?
Pretty much. Yeah. No, that's not how it works. No, that would probably cause some problems. But we do generally use college students. And what we always get is, it must be easy to find subjects. Well, it's not always because they have to stick around until they get sober again before we let them go. So and they're the only ones drinking, so it's not so fun when you're the only one drinking and everyone else.
You're sitting there by yourself, exactly. And you're like, no one's around. This is awful.
Exactly.
So what kind of things are you testing for?
So we do a lot of things looking at either how alcohol affects the endocrine response, how alcohol affects muscle recovery, how alcohol affects the immune system, how it affects long-term gains. Specifically, we've been looking at the short-term part of that because you're not allowed to get people drunk for 2 months in a row. They kind of frown upon that.
But you can do that with rats.
But you can do that with rats, exactly. So we do that.
You should check out the Navy. You can find sailors doing that every day.
There's quite a few people that do it. We're just not allowed to purposefully do it. Does that make sense? You can follow people that do it. But you're right. We do use a rat model where we get rats drunk for almost 2 months. Chronically. So, hey, if they got to live, they might as well live good,
and then you
right?
make them squat.
Then you got to make a rat lift weights?
Yeah, so I said the hard part is not getting them drunk. The hard part is getting them to squat. So generally, you got to use really small barbells, No, that's not how it works. So what we actually do, we strap a vest on them and we train them to go reach a light. And then they reach up and reach the light. Get up on their toes, reach the light, goes off, they go back. Comes back on, they go touch it.
Gotcha.
You can train them with a couple of different techniques to where they learn When the light comes on, I go touch this. So it mimics very closely a human squat, and then you can just load up weights in their backpack as they get stronger, and then you can do that across. But it's a little time intensive when you have to do that with one rat at a time.
So you got two groups of rats. They're both working out, so to speak, and there's one group of rats that's getting drunk chronically, and the other group is not getting drunk. Is that how that works?
Exactly. We actually had 4 groups. So we also had 2 groups one group that worked out and didn't. So 2 groups that drank, 2 groups that did not drink, 2 groups that work out, and 2 groups that don't. So you have all 4 different conditions. Exactly. Okay. So you can compare, see how much of it's due to training, how much of it's due to alcohol.
Okay.
So, but it really depends on the question you're trying to answer. You set up your study.
So in that particular question, or that particular study, what did you guys find?
So in that particular study, we found that with chronic alcohol ingestion, it depended on the fiber type that you had, or the fiber type you're looking at. The nice thing about rats is that their muscles are either usually 100% type 1 or 99% type 1 or 99% type 2. So you can do some fiber type specific, where humans usually 50-50-ish.
Right.
You know, so you can do some things where you can look at fiber type specifics. And it appeared that in one set of fibers, alcohol prevented an exercise-induced or training-induced increase in androgen receptor. And in the other type of fiber, you just saw that alcohol, regardless of exercise, reduced the androgen receptor.
Okay, so the androgen receptor is the thing that testosterone binds to that makes it active, right?
Correct.
So a downregulation of that.
Yeah. So if you have everything else being equal, if you have less androgen receptor or not as much of an increase as otherwise would have, then you have less of it's basically the log for testosterone being the key.
Yeah.
So you have less of a signal coming from testosterone, less of an opportunity for testosterone to signal. Because if you have no androgen receptors, for instance, it doesn't matter how much testosterone you have, it's going to have no biological effect.
Right.
So without the receptor, you have no effect. So more receptor, generally speaking, you have more effect.
So which fibers were impacted in which ways?
So interestingly, type 2 fibers were downregulated by alcohol, the androgen receptor, no matter what. So exercise didn't seem to make a difference in type 2 fibers.
The fast twitch. Right?
The fast twitch fibers, exactly. The white fibers. Whereas in type 1, the slow twitch fibers, resistance training actually induced an increase in androgen receptor, but that was prevented when you had alcohol.
So if you're slow twitch and you drink booze, that kills your gains.
Right, and if you're fast twitch and you drink, either you lift or not, it's going to go down. So
you're good. You're screwed, Doug. We're good, Mike.
Screwed. Yeah. Now again, we're talking about chronic ingestion, and that's quite different from what we're doing here. Although it's in Vegas, so it's pseudo-chronic, I guess. Exactly. So, but it does fit in also with what you see around the world with people that have alcohol abuse. That their type 2 fibers are downregulated in number and size, whereas type 1 fiber seems to be fairly well protected.
Yeah.
Okay. I imagine most people that are watching this, they're not chronically drunk.
Right, then they probably wouldn't be online, right?
Yeah. So most people are probably drinking maybe one drink a night, or they're drinking only on the weekends. Is that a good thing or a bad thing when it comes to training?
Well, I don't know that it's necessarily a good thing, although it's possible. That would be great if I could say that, right?
Yeah.
You always have to drink. Yeah, I know I'd be a lot more popular, I'm sure, yeah. Well, it really depends on the context. So it depends on what type of exercise are you doing. Are we talking endurance type exercise? Are we talking resistance type exercise? When do you drink? Are you talking drinking before exercise, during exercise, or after exercise? Believe it, during exercise is quite popular, especially like softball leagues and some of these things, right?
Yeah. I was trying to think, like, what in the world?
I've done it before.
And there's a lot of athletes that abuse alcohol and use alcohol doing games.
You know what? I remember Mike McGoldrick hit a PR deadlift one time drinking a beer. That was I remember he was like crushed the beer to it, and I was like, unbelievable.
I had a PR snatch once after a night of drinking.
Oh.
I mean, I stopped drinking around 3. I was hitting PR snatches at 10 a.m.
Yeah. Well, actually, the science, not necessarily that you would get a PR, but when you look at just drinking alcohol, no training, does not appear to have an effect on performance in in resistance training type of power events. So alcohol alone does not appear to reduce maximal strength or maximal power either while you're drunk or after you're doing a hangover. Okay. So that's the good news. Now, if you have a workout beforehand, a heavy workout, and you have muscle that needs to recover, alcohol does appear to reduce the recovery or increase the recovery time by reducing the amount of recovery that happens, so it takes longer to recover.
Is that muscle glycogen resynthesis a problem?
Probably not muscle glycogen, because that doesn't really factor in so much in like a maximal strength type event. But we've looked at a variety of muscle signalers, including the mTOR signaling pathway, which is involved a very important regulator in protein synthesis, just like the testosterone is. Yeah. And we've seen there, interestingly, in men, that pathway after heavy resistance drinking, right after heavy resistance exercise, reduces the activation of that pathway in men, but not in women, believe it or not. So, so it appears, men, maybe you don't drink so much, women, go ahead and drink. You know?
Are there any other differences between the sexes that you found similar to that?
We've found similar things with testosterone as well, where it appears that the hormonal response, so testosterone primarily seems to be affected more in men than in women. Now, of course, men have a much more robust testosterone response than women do. Right now, we're looking again to see how does that then factor into actually looking at protein synthesis and how is that affected? Because what a group Barnes out of New Zealand found in multiple studies was that, again, they do the muscle damaging exercise, giving people a high bolus of alcohol, so that the recovery was reduced. And they're looking at strength recovery. So it would take an extra day or two before they were recovered. So what we're interested in, why is that? So trying to look at these signals that are involved in recovery, including the immune system, but also protein synthesis and mTOR signaling pathway, and such. See, can we narrow down actually why is it that alcohol after exercise reduces? Because if you just take alcohol by itself, as I said, performance is not reduced the next day.
Right.
So an acute bout or a single dose of alcohol does not limit your maximal strength or maximal power performance.
I think you just made every viewer very, very happy.
So I'm hearing it's okay to drink beforehand, but afterwards it's going to have a hard time recovering.
Right. Actually, generally the advice I give is if you know you're going out drinking that night and drinking heavily, now again, we got to talk about how much you drink, then maybe you don't go and do a heavy workout or do a resistance training workout that's going to cause muscle damage, because you may be worse off the next day than if you'd never gone to the gym.
Yeah.
Because now your recovery, maybe if this Friday, maybe I'm not recovered till Wednesday instead of Monday. Right? And Monday I have another workout. Maybe you're better off just waiting until Monday or wait until Sunday and going in and getting your workout in.
So you just gave me a reason to not work out and drink heavily.
I know, it's probably...
If I'm going to drink heavily, don't work out. Got it.
Yeah.
But you're saying people could be wasting their time training on Saturday if they went out Friday night?
No, the other way around.
Right.
That if you work out Friday right before you go out, right, that maybe is not the way to go. If you are going to work out, I recommend separating, although I don't have all the data to really support this, as much time between your workout and the drinking. So maybe you work out Friday morning instead of Friday evening. Granted, I haven't done those studies yet. That's one of those things that are coming up to see what is the actual time frame. Because there's surprisingly little research done in this realm, despite how popular drinking is. And that's what a lot of people, a lot of people don't realize. People that exercise consistently drink, large national survey data consistently show that people that exercise also drink more than people that don't. College athletes drink more than the non-college peers. Consistently. So a lot of people, exercise and alcohol are incompatible. Well, we all know that it's not,
Wow.
Do you know if there's differences between drinking a beer or having hard liquor? Like, because this isn't just ethanol. There's other factors in drinking a beer versus having a cocktail.
And that's where it starts getting really tricky. A lot of the studies that I've done so far have just looked at alcohol, generally using vodka or some pure form of alcohol. Obviously, if you drink a beer, now you have antioxidants, you have sugar, you have a variety of other things that may help recovery as well. Of course, if you're really concerned with recovery, maybe, you can get those from other sources as well. Orange juice, for instance, is excellent in providing those. Now, maybe you can mix your vodka with orange juice, and there you go, right?
Best of both worlds.
Perfect.
So that may be a possibility of getting around it. But no, with exercise, people haven't looked at the specific sources, but there are studies that have looked in the absence of exercise at what causes more hangover, and actually see that the things that have been stored on oak barrels, for instance, cause more hangover for a given amount of alcohol, because it contains more methanol. And methanol is a big component of what causes hangover, because it breaks down to formaldehyde. And if you're familiar with formaldehyde, that's what you store cadavers in.
Right.
So that's not good for you.
What things are commonly stored in oak barrels, like you were just mentioning?
So like whiskey or bourbon, brandies, generally all the darker spirits, dark rum, everything sort of gram for gram of alcohol, that they give you more hangover. Now that's a little outside of the context of this.
Does that include wine?
Wine as well, but in wine it's probably more, there's some sulfites and other things in wine as well. So it gets Yeah.
I know of a company, they specialize in creating a very clean wine, and they claim to have less of a hangover if you're drinking this wine versus the traditional wine. Have you ever heard anything about that?
I haven't, but it is possible. If they reduce, it's not all the compounds that cause hangover, right? So if you can reduce some of these side or other compounds that are in there, obviously alcohol isn't involved, or ethanol, if you will. But a lot of these other compounds really what causes the nasty hangover.
So we should be just drinking Everclear.
As a matter of fact, Everclear vodka gin is fairly pure, but that's also why we use vodka in our studies, because it's a fairly pure substance, as in pure in ethanol, have very little methanol content.
Yeah. So a lot of people, they claim, whether this is true or not, that they're hungover, they feel like they're dehydrated, and that's really what's making them hungover, which I don't fully believe at all. But does hydration play into any of this stuff?
Absolutely. I mean, so hydration, obviously, if you are indeed dehydrated, which you can become, then obviously that could affect performance, and certainly it can affect how you feel and perception. Although sometimes people feel really bad, but they'll perform really well. So that doesn't always go. You know, same thing we've seen many times. People be very sore, yet their performance is not affected at all.
Right.
The maximal power, maximal strength is exactly the same. Even
It
though
does
they're really
reduce the
sore.
fun, though.
That is
It
true.
reduces the fun.
It might. So it's you said it's easy to get the rats drunk. That's not the hard part.
No.
But the general complaint about any animal model research is that the volume, whether we're talking antioxidants or supplements or pharmaceuticals, that we have to give the rats is usually so much higher than a normal human would consume them, right? So how much are you giving the rats, and then when the actual humans come into your lab, are they getting like a beer post-workout? Are they getting like a 12-er? Like, what are we doing?
Okay,
here?
so
Let's take a break, and then we'll get into that.
Okay.
And we're back with Jacob. We're in Vegas. We're in a hotel room. We're drinking some IPAs. And what do you guys
Some
have?
brown ales.
Some brown ales.
Yeah.
Talking about drinking, recovery, strength training. And I think what was the question we left with?
Well, I basically just want to get an idea of how much you're giving these people. So when you're saying that it harms endurance or doesn't harm performance, is that because they had 19 beers afterwards, or they have one shot of vodka?
right.
Give me context here.
So obviously, the amount of alcohol you take is very important for determining the outcomes that happen.
Yeah.
And you have the studies where they have a fairly low dose. They don't seem to find much of an effect with the strength.
Yeah.
Whereas with endurance performance, drinking before or during does appear to have, even a low dose of alcohol, does appear to have a reduction in performance. Largely, it seems to me to be due to glucose utilization being reduced.
Oh, right.
Which obviously in long-term 60-minute endurance type exercise is quite important and could explain that. Now, the studies we do, we give people a dose based on their lean body mass, but for a reference male or standard size male, it's somewhere between 6 and 8 drinks, but they get it in 10 minutes.
Say the last part again?
6 to 8 drinks in 10 minutes.
In 10 minutes.
Now, it's a standard drink, so it's not 6 to 8,
Are we like
beers,
no,
but
not
it is
shotgunning
similar.
beers.
No, they're taking shots.
Shots of vodka.
Shots of vodka,
6 to 8 shots of vodka in 10 minutes.
That is correct.
And then what are they doing after that?
After that, they hang out. Yeah. So this is after the workout. So we have them work out first. They do this, and then they wait in the lab. Depending on, we're taking muscle samples, blood samples, whatever it is. Have another study coming up where we can do similar dose, but they're going to do it at night, and then they're going to come back in, and we're going to test them in the morning to look at and try and see if we can tease down some more of these effects that are on endurance training, and specifically look at, is it in fact glucose utilization, or is it something else?
Are you playing music? Or is that like
dancing going on? Like,
We got a strobe light going. You know.
Video games.
Depending on the study a little bit, but generally speaking, we have Netflix, and we have a big screen TV, so they watch TV. They can do homework if they're able to. They can play on their computer. They can't sleep, but they have to be awake.
So 6 to 8 shots is considered a low dose?
No, that's considered moderate.
What would be low
moderate
dose?
to high dose. So low dose probably be about 3 to 4 shots, something like that.
Okay, that's still pumping.
Yeah.
6 to 8's a
Now
lot.
again, remember, it's not the same as shot you get at the bar necessarily, right? So it's a reference shots. But it's somewhat similar, yeah. And we do get people legally drunk. I mean, that's part of it.
Sure.
Or you can't drive. So generally, our goal is to get people to 0.12 blood alcohol level, and we usually hit that pretty well. And remember, 0.08 is the legal limit for driving, and you're definitely impaired when you're at. They're not sloshed but they're definitely impaired at that level.
So when you're testing hormones specifically, what are you guys looking at, and what are the results?
So what we've looked at with hormones, we've largely looked at a variety of hormones, but testosterone seems to be the one that has the biggest effect. Looked at total testosterone, free testosterone, which is the biologically active version of testosterone. And there we've seen actually an interesting phenomenon that was counter to what we're expecting to see. So we see in men a big rise right after exercise, what you'd expect. We haven't given them alcohol yet, they just exercised. Everything is fine. We give them the large bolus of alcohol. In the non-alcohol condition, so a normal condition, it comes back down to baseline, and generally it goes right below baseline and stays there for several hours. Yeah. In the alcohol condition, about an hour in, testosterone starts going up, and going up really high, as in higher than it was post-exercise. So that was really surprising because we were expecting it to go lower than the other condition. And that really perplexed us. That's why we moved on into then looking at the androgen receptor. What we're thinking is happening, because androgen receptor is downregulated, is maybe that the feedback is not working properly, or testosterone is being put out there, but the receptor is not taking it up. So it's not being used, so it's not being taken up. So yeah, you have more testosterone floating around, but if it's not signaling inside the muscle, it doesn't really do you any good.
It's not bioavailable.
Right, it's not bioavailable, or it's not going into the DNA to do the signal, which is what testosterone reads receptor binds to DNA to cause protein, or initiate sort of the signal for protein.
Gotcha. So on the surface, it kind of sounds like a good thing because testosterone is going up and up and up, but that's only in your blood. That's not in the muscle cells themselves.
We haven't measured it in the muscle, but also we've seen performance is reduced. We've seen all these other things are down in the muscle that are all affected by testosterone. So it does seem that even though it's up in circulation, it's not beneficial. When first this study came out, reading some of these blogs, alcohol, the new recovery drink.
I remember reading alcohol creates testosterone boost, and I was like, interesting. And I was like, well, it doesn't feel good the next day, but maybe 3, 4, 5 days later.
Yeah, but I think that's people that read, the first part of the paper and forgot to read the rest of it, because we do it in, discussion go into,
that would never happen. Never.
I'm not sure. Yeah, exactly. You got to read the whole paper through, right? Because we give some context at the end where we kind of delineate why we don't think this is necessarily a positive. Now, it could be, but I don't think it is.
Yeah, when someone wants to believe something, they're just like, oh, yeah, definitely.
Done.
I got it. Okay, drink up.
I know what I want to believe. I'm going to find the data to support it.
Exactly. But so be it. We've looked at a variety of other hormones. They don't seem to be affected as much. It seems to be really testosterone. And it makes sense because testosterone, even in the absence of exercise, is affected by alcohol. And we know that chronically reduced, and that's why we thought it was going to be higher, because in alcoholics, you have chronic reduction, like hypogonadism, or reduction in testosterone. That's why we expected to see that. And even when you give a bolus of alcohol generally to a person in the absence of exercise, you see a reduction in testosterone. So it's interesting when you put the two together that have opposite effects.
That's
you get this sort of weird increase that I can't explain, other than something going on with the androgen receptor.
So a lot of people, once they get out of their 20s into their 30s and 40s, they drink 3 or 4 beers and they wake up the next day and they're like, man, I didn't used to feel like this. Like I'm so hungover. This never would have happened to me in college. Like, have you found differences with different age groups? Like younger people tend to tolerate alcohol better than older people with relative to
We haven't looked at that. What's probably going on is also as you age, you probably don't drink as often. So just like with exercise, if you go do deadlifts every 2 weeks, you're going to be sore every 2 weeks, right? But if you deadlift 3, 4 times a week, maybe that's a little over the top, but you're not going to get a sore. So it's probably the same thing that because part of you adapt to drinking alcohol. Your liver adapts to drinking alcohol. Increases alcohol dehydrogenase, etc.
So we got.
So it's probably a training effect. So you got to keep it going. Yeah,
keep our conditioning up.
Exactly. Yeah. Now again, I don't have any. That's not a scientific necessarily fact.
You're a doctor.
But that's true. So trust me. But
whatever he says.
But exactly. That's what I think is going on there.
When you're an undergrad, you learn that there's 4 macronutrients, right? Fat, carbohydrate, protein, and alcohol is the 4th macronutrient, right?
Yeah.
But what we're always taught undergrad is, but you can't metabolize it into energy. Right, so is that true, or how does alcohol metabolism in the form of ethanol work, and can you make energy out of that? Or
well, you do make energy out of it. It's just probably not energy you're going to be used for motor for moving.
Function,
yeah, exactly. So because it gets metabolized in the liver and does produce has 7 calories, so it has almost as much as fat.
Right.
But the muscles do not use it as a fuel, so it's not a great fuel. Right, it goes to the liver. Obviously, those calories eventually gets turned into something else, but it's not going to work. It's a long process, it's a slow process. It's not going to help you during exercise. And if you're doing it for calories, well, just take the calories you need, like carbohydrate or fat or whatever it is, depending on what you're doing. Right,
because one of the things we were talking about before is I think you brought it up, Mike, is the very common thing when people finish like a marathon. or a hard workout, they're like, have a beer because it has all the carbs in it, have a big, tall beer. So is that going to help, or is that enough carbs, or what?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, it's possible that the carbs in there will be beneficial. The amount of alcohol is probably not enough that's an issue. So I get these questions like, well, what should I do, or how much should I drink, or when? Generally, I don't ever advise people to not drink at all, because that generally doesn't work. We've tried that,
Right.
So usually the point is, and what we're sort of trying to show is, well, if you just drink less, drink a little bit less, maybe separate it from your workout, you'll be okay. Doesn't mean you can't have a couple of beers, maybe just don't have 10 beers right after a workout, okay? And again, depending on what type of beers you drink, because some of them have a lot more alcohol content than others do. Right. But I don't think there's anything wrong with having a few drinks. Having a few drinks is fine. Now, if you're training for the Olympics, you might can fail, maybe not. Yeah. Although maybe you do need it to de-stress on occasion. Right. But most recreational athletes or even elite athletes, on occasion, I think it's okay. Mm-hmm. Again, moderation is really the key. Moderation is the key, and then separating it, in my belief, from your workout. So they actually have this term called Drunkorexia, where people go to the gym right before they go out to burn off the amount of calories that they're going to go out and drink.
Right. Drunkorexia.
Drunkorexia is a term that's been coined for that.
Oh, wow.
So
that's a disease.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you do it excessively, right? It could be that I have to go to the gym to do this, I have to burn these calories. It could actually be a problem, right?
I definitely know certain subcultures where that's really popular.
Yeah.
Like in certain cities, that's super common.
Yeah.
So you get off work on Friday, hit the gym really hard,
and
then you go and out to the bar.
Exactly. Now again, depends on what you're doing. If you are going to go to the gym, probably doing an endurance type exercise is going to be better or have less effect because you don't have as much muscle damage to recover from.
Right.
That being said, alcohol also impacts glycogen resynthesis. But if you're doing a half-hour, run, glycogen storage is not your concern, right? Yeah. I mean, unless you're doing a marathon, you're not going to run out of glycogen, so it's not really an issue.
Is there any research on how chronic alcohol use affects soft tissue structures, joints, tendons, ligaments, etc.?
There might be. That's not stuff I've looked into because I mainly look at the muscle tissue and the endocrine system. Mm-hmm. I would be surprised if there's not, but I'm not aware of it.
Okay.
Jacob, you're from Denmark.
That's correct.
What brought you from there to America, and why did you choose to study alcohol?
So I moved to the U.S. because my girlfriend at the time, then turned out to be my wife, is American. So it's one of those classic stories, follow the girl.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And the reason I actually got interested in alcohol was my advisor doing my master's degree, Perry Kazuris, that was his interest area. So I picked up on that, and I was like, this is really interesting. So I did my master's thesis, and actually when we got the rats drunk was for my master's thesis. And looking at receptors,
That is so much cooler than most people's master's degrees.
Also a lot more involved.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I got in. But the reason I find it interesting, one, alcohol use that is high among athletes, high among recreational users, so people that are just physically active consistently drink more. These large national surveys, it's very clear. But also alcohol affects a lot of the same pathways, systems, tissues that we care about with exercise that we look at or investigate with exercise, and often in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
So if you have something that increases, something that decreases, you put the two together, what happens? That's kind of where my interest is. What wins out, right?
Yeah.
Are you better off doing one or the other? Do them together. How do you do it? And what is the outcome from it? Like I said, maybe you're better off not going to the gym than which is odd advice to give from an exercise guy, right? Don't go to the gym, but maybe you're better off going to the gym the next day or skipping it all together.
So you were suggesting earlier that alcohol has more of an effect on endurance sports. Do you know if there's any research on how alcohol specifically affects the cardiovascular system? Heart, lungs, respiration, etc.
There's research, quite a bit of research on that side as well, but it's all from a health perspective. With regard to how it affects exercise, there's very little. We know that it reduces, as I said, glucose oxidation rate. It reduces performance in these long, like 60-minute time trials, or even a 5-minute time trial. Now, of course, the problem was some of these studies were done a while ago. The earliest I found is a study from '49, and they gave people cocaine, they gave people alcohol, they gave people strychnine, and everyone knows what strychnine is. That's a rat poison. So they gave people all kind of different things, and looked at how that affected performance.
What?
So some
Mike
of these
just perked up.
Yeah.
What?
So sometimes it's hard to, okay. So what they did 70 or so years ago, when methods weren't quite as good as they are today. How do you interpret that? Other studies they let people drink ad libitum. One of the really big sort of seminal studies, but they had everyone drinking somewhere, but some drank 5 drinks, some drank 20 drinks.
Because they're allowed to drink.
Because they just they had here's
Whatever
an
you
open
want.
bar. You drink, and then we'll come back tomorrow and we'll test you, right? So some of those are where they have a lot of variability. We try to really keep things very controlled with one amount of or one dose of alcohol. Obviously, we need to be doing dose responses as well, with more and less than what we have. The timing, what happens when you combine it with carbohydrates, antioxidants, orange juice, whatever it is that you're using. What happens if you take a protein bolus with it? And there's a study on that showing that if you take a large amount of protein with your alcohol, alcohol reduces the effect of the protein or the amount of protein synthesis you get from the protein. But if you take but it still is more than what you get from alcohol without protein.
Yeah.
So if you are drinking alcohol, other advice could be make sure you get a bolus of protein to go with it.
So you should just have dinner, drink a beer with dinner, and that's way better than just going out and drinking.
Yeah, or just drink White Russians. That's another way to go.
I like it.
You're such a problem.
I've got some
solver.
ideas for other substances you could use in your studies.
Oh, I knew this was coming.
What are you looking to study next?
So, we're studying quite a bit. Again, we're looking at alcohol right now. We're doing a set of projects looking at 24-hour protein synthesis. Actually, that study is a doctoral student study that's funded by the NSCA.
Oh, very nice.
Looking at 24-hour protein synthesis and some more, trying to better understand this signaling pathway
So
that's
what that
involved.
means is how much that you're growing or building protein up to 24 hours post.
Right, so how much protein you're building in the 24 hours after exercise.
Right.
Whereas a lot of the studies I've done so far only look for 6 hours.
Right.
Or from 2 to 8 hours. Well, we know that recovery continues on, 24 and beyond 24 hours. So we're trying to look at it a little bit longer time frame.
Do you have any sort of index in terms of how hungover they are? So, in other words, is there a relationship between the people who show up and say, "Oh, I'm super hungover," or the ones who are like, "Oh, I'm not so bad," or is it completely arbitrary?
We don't measure that because it is a very subjective.
Haha, fatal flaw.
Yeah. except I do biopsies on all of these people the next day, and they don't seem to be hungover. So
What? College kids, man.
yeah.
6 to 8 drinks?
Yeah, because we drink more than that in order to achieve hangover.
Yeah,
back
that's
in the
fair
day.
enough.
Yeah.
That's a warm-up, probably,
Yeah.
back in college.
Yeah, well, we would have been really good subjects when we were in college.
Phenomenal.
Yeah.
Well, it's not too late, people. I got to set up in my room. Okay, I came into his show. He said you were going to come give me some muscle sample. That was the deal.
I have biopsied him before.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's
That's
do
a true
it.
story.
I was his first muscle biopsy.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brave man.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Popped his cherry.
I'm better now.
Yeah. You're more gentle?
I'm so much more gentle.
Yeah,
Just caress it right
perfect.
in.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
I mean, so what I'm getting from this overall is, it's not, alcohol may not be as bad as we think it is, and
Right.
it depends on how we're doing it, and we need to compartmentalize it from our training. And I'm also hearing there's not really a lot of benefits to it aside from maybe some psychological.
Right. There might be some psychological piece. I don't think there's benefits. Certainly, whatever you would get, maybe from a beer, you could get in another way where you wouldn't have any of the potential negative effects.
Like cannabis.
That could be. We haven't looked at that yet, but now that it's becoming legal, that could be something else to look at.
Yeah.
Although we're in Texas, so it'll be a while before that's legal in Texas. I'm just going to come out and say, we'll be the last holdout, I'm pretty sure. But we'll come to Vegas and do some studies. But yeah, it's really the amount that you're drinking when you're drinking it, and just if you moderate your alcohol intake, it probably does not have as detrimental an effect as a lot of people think it is, or does. A few drinks is fine. Now, if you have 3-4 drinks every day, that's a problem because now you're going to be over-consuming. But if once or twice a week you have a couple of drinks, should be perfectly fine for most people.
I also thought it was really interesting that it was more detrimental for the endurance sports than the strength sports. I didn't know that before.
Yeah. Well, again, depends on when you look at it. So for recovery standpoint, it has more impact on strength and power, because strength and power doesn't recover as fast with alcohol. But when you're looking at sort of acute, like we're going to go lift now, we just had a beer, no problem. We're going to go run, our performance might be slightly reduced.
Gotcha, okay.
So it really depends. It's one of these, you have to think of the context. When do you drink? Before, during, or after exercise? How much did you drink? What type of exercise are you doing? And all those things, the answer to each one of those different combinations is going to be different.
I thought it was really interesting about the fiber type specificity You know, so if you have more slow twitch or fast twitch, you may be more or less likely inclined. Do you have any idea why? Like mechanism? What in the heck?
What's going on? No, other than type 2 fibers generally are much more finicky.
Yeah.
If you look at Cushing's syndrome, diabetes, a lot of other diseases, type 2 fibers are affected and and downregulated and seem to just be easily affected, whereas type 1 fibers are little tanks. They're really, really hard to mess with them. Yeah. So
awesome.
it seems to be consistent across a lot of diseases, and it is consistent around the country. The study that looked at populations all over Africa, Asia, Europe, America, and it seems to be very consistent. But chronic alcohol abuse, again, now we're talking chronic alcohol abuse, you have downregulation in type 2 fibers.
Okay, I have one more question. I'm sorry, but I just remember this. This is actually my most interesting question. How hard was this to get approved by the IRB to do these alcohol studies and give college kids 8 shots of vodka after a workout?
Actually, it's not too...
Because I'm on the IRB and I would sign away. Like, go ahead.
We don't have any problems with that. But again, we have a lot of safeguards in place. We have alcohol. We measure their breath alcohol every 20 minutes.
Yeah.
We keep them around until they are back down to 0. We don't let them drive away. We take their keys when they come. They have to have someone come pick them up.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of safeguards in place. And honestly, we have not had a single issue. We also tell them, if you leave, we're going to call the cops and they're going to come and track you.
Oh.
Nice. I'm serious. And that's being a university. We have our own police force, so it's not too bad. Yeah. But again, we haven't had a single person do this because it's not like you're at a club, there's a party, there's something going on.
You're watching
there's one person's in there drinking, everyone else is. It's a sterile environment like being at your doctor's office. There's no trouble to be had. Right. So
how long does it take them to get back to 0?
Between 5 and 7 hours.
Wow.
There you go. There you go.
All right.
Jacob, if people want to read your research or studies or anything like that, where should they go?
So obviously they can go to PubMed and look me up under Vingren. I'm the only person with that other than a Swedish dentist. So if you find something with dentistry, it's not me. Everything else under my name, Vingren, is me. You can also go to our laboratory website, the Applied Physiology Laboratory at the University of North Texas. Shows what we do, has an overview of our lab, also has opportunities we have in our lab, both for...
Are you looking for grad students and stuff like that?
We're looking for grad students, and we have funding for grad students, and there's some information there about that. And you can see our doc students and master students, see the equipment we have. We have a very nice and well-equipped labs.
And do you provide free vodka for all the grad students?
We do. My doc student who's
List
here...
just got very big for applicants.
Yeah, she had to go stock up our lab, so she went and bought 8 half-gallon bottles of vodka the other day, so she got quite a few stares when she walked into the liquor store and just cleaned them out of their big bottles.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for joining us today. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, that was super interesting.
You're welcome. Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. Cheers.
Cheers.
Yeah.
You bet.